Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm gonna be testing the 8-year-old GeForce GTX 1080 8GB GPU in Horizon Forbidden West. This one is the Asus ROG Strix version of the card. I am running it with the latest Nvidia drivers as usual, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power-Up's GPU-Z with its release date of 2016. And over on the left, we're pairing it with a Ryzen 9 7950X3D with half of its cores disabled, so it's basically the same as a Ryzen 7 7800X3D. Still very overkill for a GTX 1080, I know, but as long as you don't bottleneck it, you're gonna get the same FPS. And over on the memory tab, we're using 32GB of DDR5 6000MHz RAM in dual channel. Let's get into it! Shall we? Let's go over the settings first. I'm starting at 1080p resolution using TAA right here, and if you want to disable TAA because you think it looks soft, I think it looks great in this game, so I'll leave it on. But yeah, with it off, you can expect like one more FPS. It doesn't really make much of a difference, so choose whatever you want there. On the graphics settings, we're using the high settings preset at the moment. As you can see, didn't touch anything here, just disable like motion blur and stuff. And okay, we're getting 40-ish frames per second, which is pretty impressive for an 8-year-old GPU at 1080p high settings, isn't it? Like, this looks really good. It's one of the most beautiful games right now on PC, in my opinion. And on high settings, it doesn't look too much worse than like very high settings, which is the maximum preset in this title. Actually, you'd be hard-pressed to notice the difference between the two presets, guys. So the 1080 is doing a phenomenal job. It's not 60 FPS, I know, and this is not really one of the most intensive areas in the entire game. We'll get there. It's the Burning Shores DLC, okay? And that usually utilizes a ton of more VRAM, and it's way more intensive than this. But if you're playing the main game, the base game, basically, yes, you can expect a pretty stable experience, well above 30 frames per second at all times. So it's going to be a better experience than something like a PS4 Pro, for example, and looking better at the same time. Not only are you going to get more FPS, but also make the visuals look better. Obviously, that's to be expected because the GTX 1080 is way faster than the GPU inside of a PS4 Pro. Also, guys, I'm not testing very high settings right now, but maybe we should try it out for a little bit in this video because it's doing a great job. Once again, it's surpassing my expectations a little bit. I thought the 1080 was going to be a little bit worse than this. VRAM wise, by the way, it's only utilizing 6GB or 6-ish gigabytes and allocating 7.5, so everything is absolutely fine in that regard. Let's fight these guys over here. It usually drops a lot of FPS, especially when you don't have enough VRAM. But yeah, that's not the case with the GTX 1080. The 8 gigs are fine for high settings in this title, at least in the base game. Look at this. Even flying around, looking at so much vegetation from above, it's not a problem. It's still keeping it above 50 FPS, so it's less intensive to take a look at the map from above and flying around like this than it is to be playing down there and be close to like the grass and so on. Very well optimized game as well. Like, we gotta give props to the developers for optimizing a game and making it look very nice at the same time. This is what all of the games should look like and run like, you know? GTX 1080 is old, but it is still a very capable GPU as long as the developers care about optimization. Anyway, I'm gonna stop it right there. This is a little bit of a different area right here, you know, with a lot of buildings and so on. Maybe let's go up. No, I can't go up. Okay, let's go this way then. Take a look at this from above. Still not a problem. Yeah. It's gonna be a good experience. Now, the Burning Shores DLC is a totally different beast. As you can see, it's dropping from 30 frames per second, guys. This is so much more intensive, but it's dropping because it's already maxed out the VRAM. If you take a look at the RAM utilization, it's at around 14 gigabytes, a little lower than that right now, and the RAM usage and allocation are also down from the 7.5 gigabytes that we saw in the base game and the 6.5 gigs on the VRAM utilization that we saw in the base game as well. So that means that it already swapped some things that should have been on VRAM into the RAM, and well, this is the end result. Much lower performance, of course. This is a bit of a bummer because this game actually has a little bit of an issue handling VRAM and RAM utilizations, unfortunately, with the allocations and so on. It usually swaps things around before it needs to. Because the way this game works is when the allocated VRAM maxes out, they start swapping things into the RAM. And they should go by the utilization, not the allocation, right? Like most games do. But no, it works like that, and you need way more VRAM if you want high textures at 1080p resolution in the Burning Shores DLC again. If you're not playing the DLC, it's gonna be fine. Really, really bad experience in the Burning Shores, so in this scenario, if you want to play the DLC, you will need to lower the settings to medium. Good thing is, medium still looks very good. Texture quality on medium doesn't look as good though, unfortunately, but it is what it is. But the rest of the settings will probably give us a good boost to FPS, while the medium textures will make the DLC playable. Let's try it out after a restart of the game. And look at that huge difference, guys. Just the fact that we aren't maxing out the VRAM means that we're getting like double the FPS, more than double the FPS actually. This is a way better experience, so it will be possible to play the DLC on a GTX 1080 still with smooth gameplay. You know, this is 60 FPS average, at least so far. Of course, it's not gonna stay there because down here it usually gets lower FPS, but if you get out of these town areas and city areas, it's actually going to perform a little bit better, so you can expect 60 FPS outside, even in the Burning Shores DLC. Looking back in this direction, down into 50 frames per second, 49 right there. So yeah, we went from like 19 FPS on the lower side of things, like minimum FPS, to 48 frames per second in the same scenario. That's a massive improvement, over 2 times the improvement, and it shows. Like, it makes the game way more playable, way more smooth. I would play like this, and if you really require 60 plus FPS all of the time, it's gonna be possible if you drop things down too low. But then it starts looking pretty rough, so just keep it on medium, enjoy the good visuals because it's a single-player title and it looks really amazing even on medium settings. So yeah, have fun like this. It feels snappy, it feels good, and for an 8-year-old card, this is an awesome experience once again. Let's stop it right there now, and let's try it now on medium settings in the base game. Alright, here we have it, guys. It seems like we only got an improvement of around 10 frames per second, maybe 15 frames per second, so it's not as big of an improvement as we saw in the Burning Shores, because previously we weren't running out of VRAM, right, at 1080p high settings. So again, I think I would stick to the high settings preset at 1080p for the base game because it was a good experience. It didn't really drop from 40 FPS very often, and it looked a little bit better at the same time, especially on the texture side of things, right? But if you require 60 plus FPS, especially on average, and you don't mind a few drops here and there into the 50s, this is still a good experience. Again, like, medium settings is still better, visually speaking, than what the PS4 Pro and PS4 offered. That's a mix of like low to medium settings, mostly at least. So this is gonna be looking great, and I'm not 100% sure, but I've seen some people saying that the PS5 actually runs medium settings with higher textures, of course. So there's that. It's gonna look pretty, it's gonna play a little bit better than the high settings did, but nothing game-changing in my experience. It's gonna feel a little bit smoother in most scenarios, basically. Now, with 60-something FPS, it's gonna be much easier to aim at these bastards, you know? So maybe if you're playing on a higher difficulty, it might be worth using medium instead of high. And keep in mind, you can still use high textures with medium settings without losing much performance. You're gonna see like 2 or 3 less FPS on average if you do so. So yeah, if you want those good-looking textures, Jesus Christ, with around 60 FPS average, medium settings with high textures will do that just fine. It's gonna be a very, very similar experience to what we're seeing right here in the base game. But yeah, as usual, the game is very stable. It's very pretty to look at the same time, and it works very well on the Pascal series GPUs. This is awesome. Now, I just restarted the game and set it to 2560 by 1440. It's still probably going to be playable with medium settings, especially above 30 frames per second, so let's find out. Oh boy, it's getting very similar FPS, like 2 FPS less or 3 than what we saw at 1080p high settings. So this is gonna be stable. It's probably gonna get like 35 plus 100% of the time, and 1440p looks way better than 1080p, guys. Wow, it is a decent upgrade, although I would stick to 1080p because it's a GTX 1080 in 2024, right? But maybe you're still running a 1440p panel with your GTX 1080 from 2016. It was a tremendous 1440p GPU back in the days, and even capable of a lot of 4K gaming as well. It was once the best GPU on the market, guys. The 1080 was an awesome card, came out at the same price, I think, as the GTX 980 Ti, delivering like 35% higher performance. Really cool stuff, back when Nvidia actually cared, you know, at giving us really good performance and value GPUs. That's why the Pascal series was so great. It was also a node shrink coming from the Maxwell series, the 900 series, and that ended up in higher clock speeds, better performance, and way lower power consumptions as well. And if you've been looking at the power consumption, it doesn't seem bad, right? It's a 180 watt GPU, I think, and it's consuming around 150 to 180 most of the time, I think. And that's pretty good for the performance it's getting, even 5 years later. Obviously, you could get like an RTX 4070, which is much faster than this, and it consumes the same. But this is not an unplayable experience. It's a good experience with reasonable power consumption. You couldn't say the same 8 years after like the 700 series came out, for example. GTX 780 Ti and 780, those were both 250 watt cards. Now, what about the DLC? Holy crap, this is good. 1440p medium, playing way better in the Burning Shores DLC compared to 1080p high. Look at this, 40-something FPS. It's still mostly the same as we saw in the base game. Down into the 30s at times, but whoa, this is insane. Okay, 1440p again, TAA, using medium settings. I'm not joking, you guys. This is actually getting these FPS. An 8-year-old GPU is capable of playing the Burning Shores DLC absolutely fine. Obviously, the 8GB of VRAM help it a lot in this scenario. It's using 6-ish gigabytes and allocating almost 7.5, so about the same values and roughly the same performance as well as 1080p high in the base game. But this is the DLC. It is stable, it is good looking. It's not the most smoothest thing in the world, obviously, but I don't expect it on an 8-year-old card. It's playable. Let's fight this guy. Oh, okay, that was a very quick fight, but it's stable, as you can see. Doesn't really drop even when shooting at these boys. Come on, get over here. Oh, there's another one. I'm hearing one. Yes? Oh, no, it was just a boar. Okay. Let's go. Oh, boy. No. Ally, go up. Thank you. Fight me, boy. Don't clip into the wall. Fight me. There we go. I want to see some effects here. Come on. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. I'm with you, boy. There we go. Yeah, it doesn't really drop. A 35 FPS lock will stay there like 99% of the time. Alright, now I kind of am curious to see it at 4K. I didn't think I would be testing 4K with the 1080 in this game, but here we are, 4K medium settings. The Burning Shores is gonna run like crap, so let's load the normal base game. And well, on medium settings, yeah, it can't really do it. Not because it's running out of VRAM, because it's still not doing that. It's only utilizing 5-ish gigabytes of it, but because the raw performance isn't really there, whereas like the 1080 Ti, I think it was capable of achieving 30 flat most of the time here at 4K resolution. Maybe on low, I don't remember it. I already tested that card if you're interested, by the way. But yeah, that's 35% faster than this in terms of raw performance. It should have been capable of achieving at least 30 FPS on average. Whereas this one, I'm not counting the frames because it's very low and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here at 4K. But yeah, it wouldn't even get 30 FPS average because it doesn't even reach 30 FPS most of the time at least. But you know what? They're still low and very low. Maybe at 4K we can get away with like low settings, medium textures since it wasn't maxing out the VRAM. And 30 FPS. Not really, it's getting like 20s, but I didn't restart. After a restart, things might be different, so let's do it. Nope, here we are with low settings and medium textures, getting 20s still. It just doesn't have what it takes, guys, unfortunately. It will get like 30 plus in less intensive areas, of course. But yeah, for it to achieve 30 FPS, you'd need to utilize some dynamic resolution scaling, which actually does look pretty good. So I'm going to set it to 30 or targeting 30 frames per second, basically, with TAA, not using any upscalers, because it looks a little bit better than using like FSR to upscale the image with DRS. And look at that, now it is getting 30 FPS. It's still low settings, but since we got the textures on medium, it doesn't look too terrible, really. And it's gonna stay at 30 FPS. You could lock it to 30 FPS to have a smooth frame time graph as well, instead of those little spikes that we're seeing here and there. And it's gonna be a decent experience with close enough visuals to 4K native resolution, since it was getting like mid-20s, high 20s at times, and even surpassing 30 FPS in other areas. It will be close to a 4K native res, and the DRS works good enough to the point where you can definitely notice the difference when it would be at 25 FPS and upscaling and lowering the internal resolution to whatever it is that it's lowering to. You can notice a little bit more shimmery, a little bit more pixelation of an image, but it's not bad. It's not bad. I'd still consider this, guys. You know, if you are running at 4K still with a GTX 1080, you can get by, especially playing with the controller. It's going to be sort of like a PS4 experience with 30 FPS, but with a little bit better visuals maybe, because, I don't know, the low settings still look pretty decent, at least to my eyes at the moment. Once again, let's fight these guys here, see if it drops a little bit. 30 FPS flat. No, it's doing a great job of dynamically resolution scaling, or dynamically adjusting the resolution scale, that's it. Yep, it shouldn't have a problem at 4K. It's not real 4K, but it's close enough, especially if you are moving fast and stuff, and not licking walls and paying close attention to the grass moving and stuff like that, and pixelation. It is a great experience. And over here, it's actually going up to like 33, 34 FPS, so this is native at the moment. It's not even doing any downscaling and upscaling and stuff. Alright, so I just restarted the game. Oh my god. And we are now down to 1080p again, using TAA, no DRS, and very high settings preset. Okay, this is close to max settings, by the way. There's only a couple of settings that isn't maxed out, like texture filtering. Doesn't really matter. Texture filtering, you could set it to the maximum and get exactly the same performance. But it is getting exactly the same performance as the high settings, guys. That's very impressive. Now, the problem is the very high textures, they do use more than 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and right now we saw a little stutter right there, and that's because the VRAM filled up, or at least the allocation filled up, and it swapped things. Another little stutter there. You can see the RAM usage going up to 14 gigabytes. So in terms of raw performance, it's there. The 1080 can actually run this game at very high settings with playable FPS. It's almost the same FPS as high was, but unfortunately the 8 gigabytes of VRAM aren't enough for very high textures, and we end up stuttering here and there. It's not an unplayable experience though. Like, I have seen a lot of more games and recent titles and so on playing worse than this, even without running out of VRAM and stuff, and stuttering more, like Fortnite, for example. That's a stuttery mess in every single system I tested with, unless you have like 30 hours and you haven't installed the drivers recently, and the cache is all built up already in your system, and drivers and whatever. Yeah, then it's gonna be smooth, but for most people, since it needs to load in shaders as you play, it's a stuttery mess usually. Right now it actually dipped to the 20s, guys. It swapped so many things already. RAM usage is at 15 gigs. And yeah, it's just not gonna be as stable of an experience. It's still playable, but don't do this. Just play on high. It looks very good already. It gets nearly the same performance and visuals, and it is way more stable. So that's it, my friends. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one very soon. As always, love you all. Bye-bye. Props to the developers for the optimization, and props to the 1080 for its legendary status.